Welcome back. So it's been about 3 or 4 hours since we started the bulk fermentation process on our bread. And you can see now that the dough looks very aerated. It's light, it's smooth, and this is what we want it to look like. So at this point in time, we're ready to transfer this dough into the Bannetons here, and then we'll take it and we will wrap it up in some plastic, and then what we're going to do is we're going to put it in the refrigerator for about 24 hours. This is the beauty of sourdough bread, is that it rises slower than conventional bread with a rapid rise or other conventional yeast, and so it gives us a lot of flexibility in cooking it when we want to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place it in these Bannetons, put it in the refrigerator, and then I'm going to come home from work tomorrow and cook it after work. And I can cook it in 24 hours, in 48 hours. I can cook it when I want to. I would leave it in the refrigerator for at least 18 hours for it to develop that rich flavor. I've tried doing a lot of things. I've tried putting it in the Bannetons at this point and then leaving it out on the counter for 4 or 5 hours and letting it prove out on the counter and baking it. But I really like the rich flavor that comes from proving it over a longer period of time in the refrigerator. So that's what we're going to do. So the first thing I'm going to do, remember we've got 2 loaves of bread in each one of these proving bowls. So the first thing I'm going to do is separate the dough. Actually, before I do that, why don't we go ahead and flour the Bannetons. Typically, you'd like to do this with a little rice flour. I don't happen to have rice flour with me right now, and it's not absolutely necessary. It will work with a conventional flour, but ideally a rice flour works very well. What we're going to do now is we're going to shape it, okay? So we'll just put a little bit of flour on our bench, and what we want to do is create a ball of dough that has some tension in it. That tension is important so that the loaf will stay together and we get that big oven spring that goes up instead of out. So having tension in the dough is really important. This step is really important, and so what we're going to do is we simply fold the dough, turn it, fold it, turn it, and you can see I'm creating this tension across the surface of the dough as I turn it and turn it. So now, if we look at the dough, we can roll it around. You can see that there's a tension across the top of that dough, and that looks really good. So I'm going to go ahead and flip it upside down and place it in the Banneton. Sometimes you can pinch off the top and that will help. Other times not needed, but I'll go ahead and try that. And you can see I've got this beautiful, beautiful dough in the Banneton. And we'll go ahead and do that for each one of these loaves. We've got to cover this loaf, and the Banneton, it's not ideal to cover it with a cellophane because the Banneton is a little bit aerated. You could do that, but what I find works the best is simply taking one of these plastic grocery bags and recycling them and place the dough, the Banneton inside like so, and then that will be what we put in the refrigerator for the next 24 hours. And so we'll do that for each one of these 4 loaves. The other thing is I could put it directly in the refrigerator now, but I find that if you leave it out for 45 minutes to an hour before putting it in the refrigerator, that dough can start to prove outside the refrigerator, and then we'll slow it way down as it goes in the refrigerator. So we'll see you tomorrow right before we bake it. So it's a new day, and it's been just under 24 hours since we started proving our artisan bread in the Bannetons in the refrigerator. I got the bread out of the refrigerator about 45 minutes ago, and I've since been preheating my ovens in order to cook the bread. These look beautiful. You can see that they have they're nice and domed. They've retained their shape, and they've significantly expanded even in the refrigerator. Now the question is when do you know when bread is ready to cook, when it's been proved? This, in general, when you haven't put it in the refrigerator and you've kept it out on the counter, the way that you know that it's ready to cook is when you push in on the dough. If it retains that indentation, then you know that it's ready to cook. If it springs back very, very quickly, it's probably a little underproved. So we are ready for the next stage. So what I've done, there again a couple of ways to get that hard crust, and I want to just briefly review those. One of the ways, and again, in order to do that, we need a little thin layer of moisture around the dough when it's cooking. So we can either put the dough in the oven on a baking stone and spray it down with a spray bottle. That's one way to do it. The other way to do it is to have a hot pan underneath the rack in the oven, and as soon as you put your dough in, you can put some boiling water in the pan, and that boiling water will continue to boil, and the steam will create that coating of water over the dough. I prefer to use either a cloche, which is a stoneware, usually a stoneware baking dish with a lid, or a cast iron Dutch oven. Cast iron Dutch ovens are much cheaper and they're a little stronger. I ordered a beautiful cloche one time and it came in about 15 pieces because they're a little fragile. So I use a cast iron Dutch oven, which is tougher, but the problem is they get so hot that they can scorch the bottom. So we're going to do an interesting method of cooking where I cook for the first half with the lid on in the cast iron Dutch oven, and then afterwards I'm going to take those 2 loaves of bread and I'm going to move them up onto the baking stone and let them finish cooking while I cook the other ones in the Dutch oven. So let's see how that's going to work. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of parchment paper over each one of these. Let's take a look and see what these loaves look like when we turn them over. And we'll do 2 of them now and 2 of them in about 15, 16 minutes. So again, beautiful loaves of dough. You can see that nice pattern that the Banneton leaves on there. Sometimes if you want to, you can actually take just a little bit of extra flour, and if you really want to create a beautiful scoring pattern, we can take just an extra little bit of flour, and when we score the bread, we'll show you how that works. So for this one, what we're going to do is we're going to take our bread lame, and remember the reason that we score the bread is it's going to expand and tear in the oven, and we want it to tear where we want it to tear. So if we take this loaf, I'm going to score the loaf. And again, I want to score it deeply enough that it's going to tear along that spot. I find if you give it a little bit of a horizontal tear, then you really develop that nice ear. Sometimes if you do a straight vertical tear, it just pulls apart and it doesn't give you that nice beautiful ear that's nice to see. And then I'm just going to create a little pattern in here. So again, these are scored, they're ready to go into the oven. So I'm going to take out my preheated Dutch ovens. I have preheated them to 450 degrees. I want to cook this bread hot. The reason that we want these Dutch ovens hot is that we want that nice oven spring that you get when you put the dough into a hot Dutch oven or a hot oven. So I'm going to put the dough in, we'll put the lid on, and then we'll go ahead and start to bake. So I'm going to cook these loaves for about 16 minutes with the lid on, and then I'm going to cook them for an additional 16 minutes at 450 degrees on the baking stone. And so we'll close that up. We'll set a timer for 16 minutes, and then we'll transfer them to the baking stone. One of the important things about the baking stone is that it needs to be hot to cook the bread. And so you've got to actually heat the baking stone for longer than just the normal time that you heat the preheating oven. So I turned on both of these ovens, and it will preheat for about another 20 minutes to make sure that baking stone is good and hot. All right, so we'll see what happens in 16 minutes. So it's been just about 16 minutes, and we're about ready to transfer the bread again from the Dutch ovens up to the baking stone, and we'll see what it looks like. You can see this loaf of bread, beautiful oven spring. The bread is not cooked yet, but a great start. So now we'll put it on the baking stone to finish cooking. We'll just simply slide the parchment paper out, and we'll do the same for the other side. So now we'll cook it for another 16 minutes while we bake the other bread in the Dutch ovens, and then we'll do the transfer. So I think the bread is ready to come out of the oven. We just need to check the internal temperature. Again, instant read thermometer. The perfect temperature for bread should be between 195 and 205 degrees Fahrenheit. So let's go ahead and check. We'll insert this in one of our areas where we scored the bread. 197 exactly, that's beautiful. Let's take a look at the other one. Go into the center of the bread, 198, just right. So both of these loaves are cooked just perfectly. Now let's take them out of the oven and see what they look like. So again, beautiful, beautiful loaves. They will continue to cook internally, and and so we want to let them rest for at least an hour before we cut into them. But beautiful loaves. Just like we wanted them, just how we wanted them to turn out, and they should taste absolutely delicious. So I'm going to go ahead and transfer the last two loaves up to the baking stone, but it's going to be a similar process, and we're going to have 4 wonderful loaves of bread. It's been an hour, and we've got 4 beautiful loaves of sourdough. We've just cut into it. You can see what the bread looks like inside. Beautiful open texture. And again, this is some of the most delicious sourdough bread you'll ever taste. There's nothing better than a freshly made, homemade loaf of sourdough bread. I hope you enjoy baking.